Now, in this video, we're going to close the loop on the exercises that we've already completed. First, we interpreted. Then, we did professional reflection. Now, we're going to understand what was happening cognitively. What we did with those activities was we interpreted complex discourse, we identified difficult words, and we analyzed concepts. When we held back to analyze words in class, or if you did this exercise on video, you were able to find ways to conceptually and accurately express the message. That wasn't by chance. It was exactly as Gile describes. The key question for us is, what does it mean to truly comprehend a message? Is it to know all of the words? Is it to be familiar with the topic? Or is it to understand the idea? When you think back to the exercises that we did, if you weren't able to follow along interpreting, that might be something else. Maybe your speed isn't there yet. Your ability to recall the right signs at the right time isn't there yet. But if you just listened to the passage, were you able to understand the goal of the message? Were you able to understand the message as a whole? It just took some analysis to really dig into those complex terms to find the right way to express them. Let's go back to what we've been talking about. A word for word transaction failed. This is the problem with word for word translation. Example, going from English to Spanish. It would be incorrect to say the word aplicar, a false cognate, in the sentence aplicar para un trabajo, to interpret apply for a job. The correct way, the correct concept, and the correct meaning of interpreting that phrase would be to say solicitar or postularse para un trabajo. And here's another example. Tiene 15 años. You would not say he has 15 years. You would instead translate that to he is 15 years old. We have to remember that interpreting is not a word for word transaction. And what we see with these examples is that without comprehension, we find error. And also the meaning can vary depending on the context. So it's not about knowing the word. Knowing the words does not mean we comprehend the message. The translation or interpretation may also sound correct. For example, he has 15 years might almost sound correct. And aplicar para un trabajo might sound correct, but in reality, it isn't. So again, that tells us that knowing the words does not mean you comprehend the message. Gile gives us the comprehension equation, where comprehension is the sum of knowledge of the language and extra linguistic knowledge. This is just the basic comprehension equation. Knowledge of the language includes vocabulary, grammar, structure, but it is not enough to comprehend. We must have extra linguistic knowledge. We also need context, experience, and world knowledge. And as he says in the reading, it's not just the extra linguistic knowledge that we arrive with, but it's the contextual knowledge that we pick up while we're there, the contextual knowledge that we pick up on while we're interpreting from the situation, from the context, etc. And then he adds a key element. He says, in order to have higher level of comprehension, there's a key element, and that's analysis. Analysis is what we did when we paused the videos and looked for difficult words, words that were a challenge to us, words that we had to break down in order to find the conceptually accurate way to render the message. The emphasis here is on analysis. Analysis is not automatic. Analysis is a deliberate practice. Analysis requires attention, it requires effort, and it requires intention on the part of the interpreter. This is again exactly what we did when we paused the videos and tried to describe and analyze the words and the concepts. And it's exactly what Gile described. So analysis is not optional. It is a professional skill. Analysis becomes necessary when language is ambiguous, when there's unknown terminology, or when the discourse is complex. He reminds us of the illusion of comprehension. And he says that sometimes we believe we comprehend, but in fact we don't. And that's because familiar vocabulary can fool us. So can simple structure. So we have to remember that comprehension does not equal the feeling of comprehension. And that's just also a reminder, I think, is to check ourselves on our false confidence. But really, we go back to the main point of this, and that it's a myth to think I cannot interpret because I am not an expert. In fact, it is asked of us constantly to interpret specialized discourse. In reality, yes, you can interpret if you analyze. All discourse, including specialized discourse, has logic, relationships, and structure. And Gile gives us a model to identify and label the discourse. Nominal entities being persons and things, attributes being things like descriptions, and links, actions, connections. And he says that it's the nominal entities that'll pose the biggest challenge in specialized discourse. For example, in the sentence, artificial intelligence models improve decision making in complex environments. If we break it down using the model, the nominal entities such as artificial intelligence models, decision making in complex environments are the words, phrases that will give us the biggest challenge in our interpreting work. This is where we need the majority of our analysis. But it's the link words, for example, improve and in, that help us understand what's happening in the discourse. And that shows us that the difficulty is not in the structure of the language, but rather in the specialized terminology. Well, the very important point again is that we can interpret specialized discourse, but it requires sustained attention. It requires deliberate analysis on the part of the interpreter. Giles is telling us, yes, we can do this. And we did do it. We did it with the exercises we did in class. The important part I want to leave you with is a reminder of our professional identity. We are professional communicators. Our job is not to repeat, our job is to listen. We don't simply repeat words. Our job is to comprehend, to analyze, and to communicate the message, which means our job requires attention. It requires discipline. This is why, again, we are professional communicators. If you were able to interpret the exercises successfully, even if it, albeit slowly, you're already doing it. Now we're simply putting language to what we're doing.